Hey, y'all, we're back for another episode of the Building with Breven podcast. And pleased to say that this is our first episode with a guest speaker outside of the family, being my brother, Steven, or my father, Mike. So happy to introduce Steve Iltis on the phone here. We've talked a lot about different stages of pre-construction and the build process in our previous episodes. Today, what we'd like to do is dig a little deeper into the custom home design phase of the process. Steve Iltis is a residential designer who we've worked with on several projects, and one of the many things we appreciate about working with Steve is his incredible attention to detail on all aspects of the design. It's very easy for designers and architects to put something really cool, fun, and exciting on paper. But when you get into the field and actually have to execute, it can sometimes become a nightmare because the design was poorly thought through on actually putting it into 3D versus what's on a piece of paper. So Steve does a fantastic job thinking through all things design and how it relates to actually building it in the field. So Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. That's a great introduction. I appreciate it.
Oh, if you could, would you? I tried to set the stage, but nobody better to introduce yourself than you yourself. So, tell us a little bit about you, your background, and why are you a designer? What services do you provide, and what's your favorite part about being a designer?
In the beginning, I fell into a job and I had no idea where it was going to lead. When I was 18 years old, I went to work for a home designer running blueprints. And I always liked drawing when I was a kid, but never thought of it as something I would do professionally. So after working for this designer for a few years, I really took an interest in it and started really studying drafting. And that was when AutoCAD, computer drafting it was around, but it wasn't really commonly used yet. So I hit the timing just right that I really started getting educated on that and working for a home designer. Which helped me get my first project when I was 20 years old. So I designed 3 small houses when I was 20 years old, and I kind of dove into it. I had some help from the one of the instructors at the college, and then my boss helped me a little bit. I knocked those projects out, and that was 34 years ago. And by the time I finished those 3 houses, I had a waiting list of homes to draw. So I was actually self-employed completely when I was 24. And I'm about to turn 55. So this is really all I've done my adult life is draw houses.
Well, that's awesome, and it probably felt like it was just yesterday, right?
It does. I can remember some of the detailed things exactly when I learned them. I remember looking at those plans that I was running prints of and just seeing these symbols and seeing these notes on there. And after looking at them every day, finally started just getting into my head, what it was. So it was a real easy transition for me to get up to speed on design. And the designer that I worked for, he was meticulous about details. And kind of like what you were saying in the beginning, it has to work. It can't just look good on paper. At some point, somebody's going to be constructing this. And I call them like really big art projects. So I create them, and I know in the end there's going to be somebody actually assembling this project, and it needs to work. And that doesn't say that there's never little kinks that you have to work out, because they're all prototypes. You're designing it for the first time, and it's being built for the first time. But you just try to go over everything as much as you possibly can just to eliminate future problems when it's in construction.
Yep. Yeah, we have, as you've gotten to know us a little bit better, we've worked with quite a few other architects, and yeah, there's a lot of different ways to to design a house. And yeah, we've certainly had our issues in the field, and like you said, that's going to happen regardless, right? I mean, a custom home, it's never been designed before, it's never been built before, but the attention to detail and having the experience to find those things on paper early on makes for a smoother process down the road.
Yeah, and I know there are things that get worked out in the field, and I may not know about it. So what I really like to do when I'm working with a builder is follow up afterwards and say, hey, what were some of the issues that you had to deal with? Because if I don't know what they were, and to you may think it was not that big of a deal. We figured it out, and you don't even mention it to me. But I want to know because that's just one more thing I can have in my brain on the next one, just to make sure I don't make that little mistake again.
Yep. Love that continuous improvement. So what's your favorite part about being a designer? What do you love about it?
I love the people. I mean, it's people come to me doing something that's exciting. It's a dream. You know, if I was fixing their transmission, probably wouldn't be as much fun. I'm actually creating something for them, and to design a house for somebody, you have to get to know them. You can't just write down number of bedrooms and bathrooms and ask a bunch of questions and then just create it. You really need to know them because there are things that you can do in their design that they never would have thought of. So if I kind of know what their hobbies are, know what they like to do, know about their family, know about their pets. If I have all of that information as I'm designing it, I'm thinking, yeah, I think this is something they're going to like. Previous client may not have liked that because it doesn't appeal to them. But I've had examples or situations where guy comes to a meeting and he's wearing a hat, and I'll say, so where are you going to put the golf cart? And he looks at me funny. He's like, how do you know I have a golf cart? I go, well, you have a Titleist hat on. I know that you're a golfer. So he's like, yeah, I'm a golfer. So that's just kind of getting to know my clients a little bit, and that makes it a lot of fun. And then of course, when it's done and I get invited to the home warming party, and just seeing all their family and friends there, it's really cool.
Yeah, that's got to be really gratifying. We get that same sense of accomplishment when we take one of your plans, build it, and then we get to hand the keys over to the homeowner and say, hey, we were very fortunate and grateful for the opportunity to be able to bring this to life for you and your family.
Yeah, it's really good. And, that helps business too. I mean, I know that y'all are just dedicated to doing a good job for people and making sure that they're happy with their house. And there's no better endorsement than that. If you get invited to the housewarming party, you've done something right. And any time in the future, if a friend or family member needs a home built, your name is going to come up. That's just the way it's going to be. So those are the best referrals. And that's why, just like you, we go the extra mile to make sure that the client's happy. We're not done until the client is happy.
Yep. Of course, that's the goal. Each and every day, every action we take is with that in mind. So, Steve, let's. I want to jump into some questions. I think we're going to provide a lot of insight to potential custom home owners that are looking to jump into this process and help them just understand some of the details of the design phase. But one short question before we do that: what's the difference between a designer and an architect? Because sometimes I use those terms interchangeably. And I know there's a difference amongst those, even though the plan set is still designed and complete at the end, right?
Yeah, and I get called architect a lot, and I depending on the situation, sometimes I correct people and explain it, but sometimes it's just not important. They're just kind of referring to me as the guy that drew their house. But I think the main difference is, and I've actually designed several homes for architects. I think the main difference is, and I've never been to architectural school, but this is my assumption. Most of it is the training revolves around commercial. Um, there are architects that specialize in designing homes, but I think they do that. They take their knowledge that they learn from being an architect and they learn how to draw a house. But it's my understanding that when you're in architectural school, you're not going to be drawing house plans. You're most likely going to be drawing mostly commercial type construction. So, if somebody comes to me and says they want a restaurant, I was like, look, I could probably draw it, but I'm not an architect. You need to hire an architect for that. Or if it's a multi-story building, I can do it up to a 3-story house. I can do, threeplex projects, stuff like that. But then once you get beyond that, in most cities, it would be required to have an architectural stamp. So the end result, whether it's drawn by me or drawn by an architect, all the plans go to structural engineering regardless. So, what I tell people is I think I'm really good at listening to people, understanding their wants and needs, putting it on paper, making sure it works, and then the engineer makes sure that it's structurally sound. And that's really the common denominator, is having that engineer. And then of course, when my plan goes to engineering, it has to work. If I and it does, but I'm thinking if somebody just dives into this and says, I'm going to start drawing houses, there's definitely a learning curve in there, because some things, not to say that they couldn't potentially work, but it could be very complicated, and typically that adds a lot of cost. So I try to design a house that's teed up for for the engineer to, the beams need to be, have a place to rest. You don't want to span too far because you start getting into steel. So we work through all that, and that kind of goes into that value engineering as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a term we've used on several previous episodes, value engineering. So we'll probably get into some of that here today as well. So let's jump into some of the thick of this. Where do you begin with a homeowner? What does that first meeting look like? What does the homeowner need to be prepared for? Like, what can they bring to the table? How do we start? Or where does someone start if they come to you and say, I have a piece of land and I don't know what I'm doing. Help me.
Yeah, the first thing I do when somebody contacts me is, of course, I want to know where they're building. And so Google Earth is great for that. I can immediately have their property in front of me within a couple of minutes into the phone call. So I'm just trying to figure out, the topography of where they're building and a little bit about the area and a little bit about them and what they're wanting to do. And then I'll go over the process, which I think we'll probably talk about here in a minute. I'll kind of go over the design process with them. And then depending on where they live in relation to their property and where it is in relation to me, I really like to meet at the lot. What I've found is, one, I need to see it, but also it's a really good way to get to know somebody quicker. If we meet at your property and we walk it together and start having conversations, it seems like we get to know each other faster than we would in my conference room. It's just, I don't know why, but sometimes they've got their kids with them, maybe their dogs with them, and we're just kind of walking the property and talking and hanging out. Sometimes we'll go get a bite to eat if it's around lunchtime. So it's a really quick way just to start learning about this family that you're about to design a house for. So
Yeah.
that's how I like to start it. Now, sometimes that doesn't work if they're nowhere close to where their property is. Sure, we meet at the conference room, and then we'll try to meet up at the property afterwards, or I'll just go visit it by myself. And I always take my drone with me so I can get some drone footage and send it to them. That's something that I need for myself, but it's also something that people really appreciate, having some drone footage of their new property that they bought, so they're seeing it from a perspective that they haven't seen it before. And then also in the hill country, a lot of times there are some really good views from the second floor, so I can take my drone up about 15, 16 feet and shoot some video from that height so they can get a feel for what their view is going to be like.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that approach. If homeowners are able to do that with their architect that they have chosen to move forward with, you come at them just saying, hey, you don't jump right into, okay, let's get rooms on a piece of paper. It's more just tell me about your life, tell me who you are. And I think that connection of just I want to build a relationship, because that is important to you actually building them a dream home that they just or designing a dream home that they fall in love with. That's huge, right? So I love that. It's just, hey, let's talk, let's chat, let's get to know each other before. Okay, well, how big is it going to be? How many rooms do you want? I mean, that stuff's going to come in time, right?
Yeah, I typically start with a little bit about their background, what they do for a living, kids, what ages they are, if they have pets, family, are your parents still alive? And if so, where do they live? And the reason I'm asking those questions is one, to get to know them, but also I know when I'm designing their house, like for instance, if somebody's family lives really close, there's a good chance they will visit each other but not spend the night. If your immediate siblings or parents live 6 hours away, now it's very likely they will spend the night. So that helps me when we're talking about the design and the budget. It's like, okay, how much money are we going to put into guest quarters? Because as of right now, you don't seem to have any guests that you think are going to be staying with you. So, but if somebody says, well, my parents live out of state, they come in for 2 weeks, a few times a year. Okay, well, that's a different guest suite. So just having that background that's in my head. So when they do start giving me the criteria, room counts and all that, I know why they're doing what they're doing. And that's very helpful to me.
Yep. No, that's fantastic. So let's move forward. You've had that initial meeting. You've spoken to them. What does the full process look like, right? So you have the first talk over the phone or something like that. Ideally, if you can meet at their lot, you accomplish that. You have a good conversation with them. You get a better understanding of what their wants and needs are. So walk us through the process from that to a final complete plan set. And
Sure.
I think at that point we can jump into obviously how long does that roughly take? And obviously the easy answer always in our world is it depends, right? But you can
It
give
does,
us
but
some
I've got a
ranges.
it,
I
it
hope.
does, but I've got a pretty good answer on that one.
Good.
It took me 30 years to figure out how to answer that question, but I think I can answer that one now. Um,
We're figuring out how to answer. How much is this going to cost when
yeah,
there's
oh
about a
boy,
million different variables that are
yeah,
unknown? But you have to be able to answer it. You do.
yeah, yeah, you sure do. So, once we've spent some time together, getting to know each other a little bit, at some point I'm going to ask them, or I'm going to tell them, actually, I would love to design your house, and then I'm going to ask them if they would like for me to be their designer. Basically, are you ready to commit to me? And I've got a pretty high rate. Typically, if I spend some time with people and meet them at their lot and get to know them a little bit, it's very rare that they don't select me to design their house. But once they say yes, then I ask them for about 3 hours of their time. And just basically, can we get together uninterrupted for 3 hours so we can just talk? So when we sit down at that meeting, I already know a lot of the blanks because we actually, I've already filled some of them in. But we're going to go room to room and we're going to talk detail. We're going to talk about everything that's going in their kitchen, um, everything that's important to them about their laundry room, their back door, outdoor kitchen. How do you cook? What do you cook? Do you smoke stuff, or you just grilling on a gas grill? I mean, it's really 3 hours. There's been times it's actually taken longer than that. So at some point, though, in that conversation, I will say, you know what, I've got it. I've got this house in my head. I know y'all now. I'm ready to get to work. So then I start drawing, and typically about 3 weeks. We'll look at our schedules. At the end of that 3 hour meeting, and then we'll kind of go ahead and look at a tentative date. 3 to 4 weeks out that we could get back together. And I really like that. I've heard stories about people hiring somebody to design their house and then they don't hear from them for months. Um, I like to go ahead and set that date. Like, let's get together 3 weeks from today. If it's Thursday, let's get together 3 weeks today on Thursday. I'm going to present these plans to you. Then they know that that's going to happen. I don't miss deadlines. If I tell you it's going to be ready by then, it will be ready by then. So when we sit down and review the plans, I kind of like to read back through my notes just to kind of refresh their memory and what they told me. So what I'll say, okay, here's things that were really important to you when we talked 3 weeks ago. Kind of go through a kind of a bullet point list of it, and then it's okay. And here's the plan. So we're going to walk through it, and we're going to make sure everything that was on that wish list is in that plan, and take it room by room. So initially, I say don't get worried about the details yet because I want you to see the whole plan. If you look at the kitchen first, let's don't have a conversation about what type of oven that is. Let's just see where the kitchen is in the house. Let's see what the bedrooms are. Let's see how it flows, and see if you like the overall plan. And then once we've done that, and they say, yeah, this really looks good. We think we like it. We're seeing it for the first time, but we like what we're seeing. Then we would kind of get a little bit more into the details. But really, at that point, I asked them to pause and say, before we figure out how many drawers and cabinets and all those details, where lighting is, take this home with you. You're seeing it for the first time. Take it home with you, discuss it without me in front of you, live in it a little bit. Think, okay, what's my daily routine like? And lay those plans out on your dining room table or wherever's convenient at your house, and just multiple times a day, just walk over to it and look at it and think about it, talk about it, and gather your thoughts. And then if when you have some feedback to share with me, it could be a text, it could be an email, it could be a phone call, or you may say, we need to get together and meet again. You make that decision on how you want to proceed, but you need to convey your thoughts to me. And one point that I always make to my clients is if there's something that doesn't seem to work for you, don't feel like you have to fix it. Because I've had people say, well, this wasn't exactly, the way we wanted it, but we can't come up with anything else, so this is fine. I'm like, well, no, that's not fine. Maybe give me a chance at it. I designed the whole house, and this one little area you're struggling with. Give me a chance. Explain to me. Maybe I missed it. Give me a little bit more explanation as far as what you're looking for. And usually I come up with a solution, and they say, yeah, that's great. That's what we want, and then we move forward. So moving forward means, okay, we've seen the floor plan, we know the square footage, and we've seen a front elevation. Let's go ahead and draw the other three elevations, and get a roof on it, get it far enough along to where they could present it to you, the builder, and say, okay, we have these preliminary plans, and this is where we're at. Everybody has a budget, so their question is going to be, what do you think this is going to cost? And at that point, what I encourage my clients to do, whether you're the builder or whoever the builder is ask that builder to kind of give you a range. Say, based off of your expertise and your past projects, what's the kind of the minimum amount that we can build this house for? And then kind of what do you think could be, not going crazy, but, really nice stuff. So kind of give us a range, is it, between 800,000 and a million. That's 200,000, but it's still enough for them to say, okay, we're okay in that range. We prefer to be at the bottom end of that, but we're okay in that range but if they're not okay with that range, then that's when we have to have the conversation about what it is that's driving the cost. I got everything in the house that you're looking for, but it's larger than you wanted it to be, and there's some really high-end amenities that you've talked about having. So something's got to give here, but that's the time to really focus on that budget. We do not want to go any farther than that until that is established, because there's nothing worse than getting really deep into the design of a house and the clients absolutely love it, and then they find out that it's out of their budget, because it's just kind of, you've had this dream for so long, you bought this property. It's really a hard hit. I think it could be hard on marriages. I think it could be hard on families, when it happens. And you tell your friends about the house that you're building, and then all of a sudden you start having to scale it back. So really, it's not the fun part of the process. The budget part is not the fun part. But what I've found is if we get that out of the way early on, and we do get in that range, then it does get fun, because they can say, okay, we're okay between this number and that number. We're building this house. This is happening. It's not let's get these plans drawn and hope for the best. It's like, no, this is going to work, and that's when it gets fun, because the dream is getting closer to being real at that point, and they really seem to get excited once we got the awkward part in the budget out of the way. So once we've done that, I call everything that I just talked about really phase one. So once we've done that, and we're ready for phase two, I ask two questions. One, do you love your plans? Do you like the design? And do you feel like you have a pretty good idea of what it's going to cost? If they can't say yes to both of those things, then we're not done in phase one. We are going to hang out in phase one and do whatever we have to do before we move on. Because phase two is where we do start getting into the details. I start doing all the cabinet elevations, the electrical plan, which is switches, plugs, ceiling fans, under cabinet lighting, exterior lighting, everything electrical. Very tedious. When you think about how many plugs and switches and lights are in a house, it's tedious. But that's really what happens in phase two. So I will design those two elements of the plans, and then I will present those to the client. And we go through them one by one. And on the electrical, I really explain to them what the symbols are, and how, and make sure they understand what the lighting plan is, because it's so tedious that some people kind of get deer in the headlights when you really start going over every little deal. But once I explain to them, what the symbols are, then they can take that home with them and kind of mark that up and say, yeah, we want to plug over here, or we want to add some extra lighting. We want some more recessed lights in a certain area. So I'll incorporate those changes in. Same thing with the cabinets. Maybe they want more drawers than cabinet doors, or vice versa. So we'll go through that. And that's really a good opportunity for them also to start doing kind of an inventory. When we do those cabinets, think about the things that are in your kitchen and start thinking about where you would put those in your new kitchen. And then another thing to think about when they're at that stage is, a lot of times people store stuff in the house that they're currently in, wherever they can find a spot. So they don't have enough room, say, for instance, in their laundry room, so they store some of that stuff in a closet, or a closet somewhere. So they think their closet's too small, because their closet's so crammed, but their closet's not too small. Their laundry room's too small. So, we really start thinking about everything has a place. When the movers are there moving your furniture in, and they walk to the door and say, ma'am, where do you want this? You already know where it's going. That's not, we'll figure it out. You don't have to start shuffling stuff around looking for a place, because we designed the house around you and your furnishings. So everything has a spot. So that's really what we do kind of in those early phases. Once we have done the design part of it, which is the floor plan, the elevations, cabinets, electrical, from their standpoint, the design part is pretty much done. What I still have to do is the technical part. I still have to draw the foundation form plan, all the framing details, calling out window sizes, door sizes, header heights, all of the stuff that they're really not involved in, but everything that you would need to build their home. So that's what happens in that last phase. And then at the end of the last phase, it goes out for structural engineering. Typically, that takes about a month for that to get done, depending on which engineer you use and how busy they are. But I've noticed it seems like that's kind of a good average. So during that 4 weeks, if there are any little details we need to wrap up on cabinets or electrical that doesn't affect engineering, we have that time to wrap that up. And my goal is to have the plan done by the time the engineering is done. That way you can go immediately for permits if you're building in a city. And then also one little thing I left out of that is HOAs. It's during that early stage of the design, we would go ahead and start engaging with the HOA just to make sure we're playing by the rules and make sure that you're not going to have a problem getting an approval.
The lovely HOAs, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's good and there's bad. And I've seen all. I've had some that are so easy. It's really a nice, pleasurable relationship. I've had some that I don't think they want this house built in their neighborhood. So I've seen it all. And what I've found is engage with them early. I let them know that they're the boss and you're willing to play by their rules. Give them that respect, and it seems like it goes a long ways.
Steve, that's a great overview and a lot to unpack. And I was anxious to jump at a lot of those comments and add on, but I needed to keep my mouth shut. So, a few points there. What I want to just reiterate is how you have a very strong focus on completion of what you called phase one, saying, hey, do you love this house? And do you know how much this is roughly going to cost? A term that we use with our homeowners quite often when we're talking ranges, because we can't give them a more firm number at that point anyway. It's not complete, right? And it's not fair to us to say it's going to cost exactly this when it's not 100% finalized. And we use the term no less than. So you say, hey, what's your budget? Well, we're going to say, hey, that house is going to be no less than $1 million, but probably in the range of $1 million to 1.2, right? And then I love that you say, hey, okay, we got to be really comfortable with it now, because that is the time where you can make changes that's going to save dollars. Later on, when you're making changes, we use the term, you're saving pennies when you're making changes later, right? Well, let's shrink this room because we're trying to save a little square footage, and that's saving pennies compared to saving dollars when you're at the phase one of, hey, let's redesign this, let's take this whole room out. So really, really critical. You answered one of my other questions I was going to ask you, which is great, but this is another reason why it's extremely important for the homeowner to consider bringing in a builder as early on as possible in this process, right? We have worked with homeowners that have had plans designed by somebody else, complete plans designed, and then they come to us saying, hey, quote this. We go through the process on one of them. We actually got the job, and then we had to go back and tell them, hey, this isn't going to work. There's not enough room on your lot for a septic system. So talk about having to go back and do a bunch of redundant work. And they actually had to go buy a completely different piece of land to build that dream home because they didn't want to change the house. So it's those types of things that having the right partners as early on as possible with that architect, designer, and the builder will save a lot of headaches and a lot of stress later. It can. And
that is great. Yeah. That's great insight. You're right, because you're a professional and they're going to need you as a builder anyway. Why not engage you from the very beginning? I know you guys are willing to take the time to do basically what I'm doing, getting to know your client and understanding their wants and needs. And I know you're going to be asking questions that pertain to the budget as far as finishes. What type of appliances were you thinking? What type of flooring are you thinking? Because those are things that can really move the needle. So you're gathering information during the process of design, and to your point, there may be a pitfall like the septic situation, so where they would find that out earlier, and maybe there's something we could do with the design to make that work, but maybe not. But if they're going to have to change lots, like the story that you're talking about, you'd want to know that sooner than later.
Yep, exactly. So what are the different ways, shifting a little bit to the cost of design? What are the different ways architects, designers charge for their services? I know that a lot of people will say, well, I'm going to go out and talk to a few different architects because I haven't I haven't fallen in love with one yet, and they're all giving me different prices. How do I proceed, right? And we know, before you answer, we know that price isn't everything, right? Sometimes we always say, look, we don't always want to go with the cheapest because you get what you pay for, and going with the most expensive maybe isn't the best value, right? So there's a
Right.
balance at all times when you're making decisions like this.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty common that it's the fee is based off of square footage. So it's some charged by the living area footage, some charged by the total area, which would include garage and porches. That's really the most common way of doing it. And you're right, prices can be pretty drastically different, and um, you really have to kind of look at the value of what you're hiring somebody to design your house. You're going to spend a lot of money, whether it's a good design or a bad design. You're spending a lot of money, so obviously you want a good design. So you really need to just look at the people's past work, talk to their past clients. If they can't introduce you to several past clients, then that's a red flag. I had a client, it's been several years ago, asked me for a reference list, and I just put down like 20 names. And I started getting calls from my past clients. Hey, so and so called asking about you. And I figured out she called everybody on that list. And she said, well, looks like you're designing my house because they're all telling me I'm crazy if I don't use you. So, I don't think it's rare that people go to that extent, but I think you need to at least talk to a few. And then also, what I have found, and you probably found this too, our past clients, they like us and they want us to be successful. They will open their homes up. I wouldn't want to take advantage of that, but I have clients that would probably be really excited if I said, "Hey, I've got a client that's really considering me, but they're not sure. Can I show them your house and let them talk to you?" They would absolutely do that.
Yeah.
So if you have a designer or an architect that's willing to offer that to you, that's a really good sign. And then the other thing is they have to just technically be capable of doing what you want them to do, which is a good design for them. I've had situations where people have come to me after they had hired somebody else and they're just at their wits' end, and they say that they're so nice, but every time we see revisions, it's just not what we want. And what I've explained to them is you can be really nice, and this is not that this is not it's not that they're a bad person. They probably really do want you to be happy because that's how they make money, is getting your plans done in an efficient way. They just don't have the talent to do it, and you can't fix that. You can't fix that situation. So you just want to make sure that who you hire to design your house is capable of meeting the expectations that you have. So price does play into that. What I have found is if you don't charge enough, you will have so much work that you can't keep up, and none of your clients are getting as much attention as they should get.
Yeah.
So I like to design about 20, maybe 25 houses a year, and that's it. I just really can't do more than that. So when the time comes that I meet a new potential client, if I just can't take something on, I will say, look, if you're not in a hurry, I'd love to design your house, but it may be a couple of months before we can start this process.
Yeah.
And people really seem to appreciate that, because the opposite of that is just saying yes, taking a retainer. And I think that's what happens to some of the stories that we hear, where it just kind of gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
The design firm takes the retainer, knowing full well that they can't get started on it for
Yeah.
several months, and that's just a really bad way to start the relationship off, and it's bad business. My thought is I have to finish plans as fast as I get new plans coming in, because that's the
Yeah.
only way my business model works, is getting as many done as I have coming in. So.
Yeah. It's what we talk about all the time. It's about setting the expectations early on and then just following through and delivering and hopefully exceeding expectations. And, one other comment you made earlier, I want to bring it back up, is you said after the initial meeting at the lot or in the studio, hey, let's get a time on the calendar right now that I'll have an initial design drawn up, right? Very rough draft, and it'll be 3 weeks down the road. And I can tell the listeners that you've delivered on that with us 100% of the time. And it is really nice to know that, hey, in 3 weeks or less potentially, but he's promised 3 weeks, he's going to deliver. And that goes a long way. And honestly, aligns very well with the values and the guarantees that we have here at Breven Homes, with the on time and on budget guarantee, saying we guarantee you're going to be moving into this house within this time period. So
yeah, and people really appreciate that. If for this just, I mean, it's typically 3 to 4 weeks, but if I was in a situation where I have a new client coming in, and actually next month I'm going on vacation for like 8 or 9 days, I would tell them right then, look, typically I would be ready to meet in 3 weeks, but I'm going to be out for a week. So it's going to be probably 4.5 to 5 weeks. They're fine with that. But if I tell them 3 weeks and it's 5 weeks and they're upset, they just want you to be honest with them. And I think that we owe them that. There's no reason, not to. If they say, well, 5 weeks is unacceptable, we're not going to wait that long. That's their decision to make. It never happens, but that's their decision to make. So just tell them the truth, and it goes a long way.
Yeah.
I think that now that we're kind of talking about timeline, I could touch on that a little bit more, because I know we touched on it earlier about how long it takes to get a set of plans. And the way that I figured out how to answer that is I figured out how much time I need to design the house, but I don't know how much time they need to get the information. So I've had projects that have taken a year. Now, I wasn't working on that house for a year, but I had it in my list of projects for a year, and they were in no hurry. They're going to retire in 2 years, and they just wanted to get the process started. They're in no hurry. So what happens is when I present that plan to them after that 3 weeks, they take off with it, and I may not hear from them for a month. So I'm not working on it for a month, but that just added a month to the clock. So let's just say after a month they come back and they have some changes. I typically turn changes around in 1 week. So once they come back to me and say, hey, we really like everything except for this area over here, we want to rethink some stuff, within a week I would have a new drawing to present to them. So once we kind of go through that process a few times, I've kind of added up that on most houses I need around 8 weeks on my end.
Yeah.
And then the time they're spending with you, going over budget, getting financing squared away, waiting for engineering, that's all stuff that I don't have any control over. So if they need 2 or 3 months on their side and I need 2 on mine, then we're looking at 5 months or so.
Yeah.
But I've done houses in little as 6 weeks before. I've had people that are moving, and they're going to be in a different school district, and they got kids they need to get enrolled, and they're like, we need this yesterday. And I remember when I did this, it was several years ago, and I explained to the lady, the couple, that I can do this. I said, but I need answers no longer than 1 day after I ask questions or whenever I present something to you. And they said we can do it, and they did it. And it was a 5,000 square foot house, and we were done in 6 weeks. We were done, and where they were building, it was outside of the city. They were cash customers. They started that house immediately. So it can be done that fast. I don't encourage that, but just to kind of give you an idea, if somebody asked the question, what is the fastest? That's it probably. But I would say most of my projects end up taking about 4 months from the time they hire me to the time that they're completely done.
Yep. Yeah. That's great perspective on the timeline. What else should future custom homeowners know about the design process to make this part of the process more, or their experience more enjoyable, right? We all focus on just hopefully providing the best experience throughout the whole phase. And we've all heard, anybody who's ever talked to a homeowner that's built a custom home, is that we've heard the horror stories, we've heard the nightmares, that's all you hear about, it seems like, when you talk to people and they reflect on their journey. There's obviously a lot of examples where people have had a great experience, but what should the homeowners be? What should they know to enjoy it as much as possible at this phase?
Yeah, I really think that being realistic about the budget, hiring professionals that know what they're doing and that are going to shoot you straight, hire people that you trust, and really be realistic with that budget, because like I mentioned before, that can really cause a lot of problems if you don't. So I think that's probably the most important thing. Is I've had clients that are talking to builders, and they're talking to a lot of builders, and I get the sense they're looking for somebody to tell them what they want to hear. So they'll talk to 3 or 4 builders that are shooting them straight, and then they get one that tells them what they want to hear, and they gravitate towards that builder. And that never turns out good because I've seen situations where, just kind of throw out numbers, three builders say it's going to be around $1 million to build this house, and they get one that says 800,000. They go with that builder. In the end, they still spend $1 million, but they had a horrible experience because the house cost what it cost. But every time they make a selection, they're over budget. Everything, they're constantly being informed, this costs more than what we thought it was going to cost. Yeah. Framers, man, the framer just charged me more than I thought. And before they know it, everything's over, and they spent the same amount of money and had a terrible experience versus accepting that it's going to be $1 million and picking a builder that you trust and like and having a good experience. So I've seen that happen many times. So I think that would probably be the top one that I would recommend to people.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And we've seen it ourselves too. And you can guide and consult as much as you want. And some people choose to listen, some people don't. And you feel bad for them, right? I'm just going to go with the cheapest builder. And oftentimes that doesn't turn out well, right? And what we talk about oftentimes is it's very hard to compare bids or estimates from builder to builder because there's so many different variables. What has been assumed? What information is known? What information is not known when I'm giving you this price? So, that we could talk about that for days, but really good insight.
Yeah, trying to compare budgets for different builders. I can't even imagine the nightmare. First of all, you don't know what half the stuff is on there. And then you say, well, this builder has this on his, but this one doesn't have it. I'm not even sure what it is, but this one doesn't have it. So I can see how that could really, the water could get really, really muddy with that.
Yeah. So Steve, I got one final one final question for you. What are three of the most common things that are overlooked during the design phase that in hindsight homeowners wish they had considered? With your experience, you obviously think about those things as early on as possible. But if you could give potential homeowners or people looking at the custom home design three things to consider, what would those be?
Yeah, that's a challenging question for me because we are so thorough that I'm not sure how to answer that, to be honest with you, because I feel like if they follow the process the way that we present it and they dedicate the time to it, that they're not going to find three things that they wish they would have done differently.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how to answer that one. I'm not sure if you can maybe ask that in a different way that would make it easier.
I just wanted to challenge you at the end. No, I think you covered it earlier on too, where you talk about just the iterations and the hey, we're not gonna move too fast and then have to go back and do work over again, right?
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Really dedicate the time to it. Communicate a lot with your spouse if you're married, or whoever you're going to be sharing the house with. I've told people before when we start the process, and I don't really feel like they're completely on the same page, and I'll tell them, look, there's three of us sitting at the table. We all know we're talking about a house. Each of us have a vision of what this house looks like. And we don't know we're not sure that the other ones have our same vision. So we've really got to spend the time to make sure in our heads we know we're looking at, obviously not the exact same thing, but we're kind of looking at the same house. So what I've told couples before is if y'all are on the same page, and you're on the same page, it makes it a lot easier because now I just have to figure out what that is versus figuring out three people. I know mine, but then figuring out two more people. So, and I've joked around with clients, the wife might say, I want to add a sewing room onto the house and a hobby room. And the guy's like, well, if you're going to get that, I'm going to get a 4-car garage. And they'll kind of start going back and forth at each other. And I just kind of like smile at them. I said, look, let me know when y'all are ready to get back to reality here because we have a budget, and then I tell them as a home designer, I'm charging you what I'm charging you. But if my marriage counseling fees kick in, it's going to get a lot more expensive. And they get a laugh out of it, a light in the room, and we move on. But I try to keep it light and fun. I explain to people that you're blessed to be able to do this. And there's a very small percentage of people in the world that could sit down with somebody and describe a house and then have it designed and built on the piece of property that they bought. That's just a very small percentage of people that can do that. It's a blessing. And it should be fun. There's going to be stressful times during the process, but they should be minimal, and don't let it stress your marriage out. It's just not worth it. It's a house. It's not worth
Yeah.
putting a strain on your relationship.
I, you said that so well. It is. We see it on every single home we've ever built with homeowners that it's easy to become stressed on certain parts of the build. I mean, you're watching it come to life, and it's a major construction project, and things happen, and you see husband and wife arguing and all that, and then at the end of the day, they get this complete home that is beautiful, that is everything that they wanted it to be, hopefully fit within their budget, and the quality's there, and all those stresses are long forgotten about, right? So,
Right. Right.
No, really, really good point. Steve, thank you so much for your time. This has been a blast. I've had fun talking to you. How can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for our listeners to reach out to you and connect with you for some further conversations if they're at that stage?
Sure. Yeah. And one thing I can kind of back up when we were talking about my business and what I do, I actually do two different things. I do full custom design, which is really what we've been talking about on this podcast. And you can find me at steveshannondesign.com. That's Steve Shannon, SHANNON design.com. And then when you go there, you will meet my business partner, which is an interior designer. Some people already have an interior designer. Some people want to wing it themselves. Somebody wanted to hire an interior designer. So if you go that route, then I do offer those services. The other service is plans. It's common for people in the early stages to start looking at house plans on the internet. You can use them for inspiration mainly, but I do have a collection of plans on my website, which is txhouseplans.com. And I've just taken some of my past projects and put them on there. So if somebody happens to find the dream home on there, they can actually purchase that from me. If there were some modifications that need to be made, I can do that. Everybody needs a site plan showing the placement of the house on their property, the driveway, sidewalk. We can take care of that. I think it's a good place to start by just looking at some plans. And I've had people come to me and say, hey, I really like the kitchen on this particular plan. I like the master bedroom on this one. I like the game room on this one. And they just show me the features that they like from those plans. So that really is helpful because I can start asking them, what is it that you like about each of these areas of the house? Then I can create a plan for them, incorporating those features in. And they say, look, it's not going to look just like this because it needs to be a different shape for the exterior elevation that you want or to fit your lot. But I understand why you like this bathroom. So I can design a bathroom for you that has these amenities in it. So that's helpful. I think that's a good place to start. So go to either one of those websites. You can easily reach me through the contacts on those sites.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's, you get to be like a puzzle builder at the same time, right? I like this from this plan, this from that plan, and you just try and put them together and make it jive.
Yeah, it's like I'm playing Tetris sometimes. I'm just trying to make all the pieces. I'll rearrange all the pieces and try to make them all fit in. It's a lot of fun. I can, come up with 3 or 4 different options for bathrooms pretty quick, and present them to people and let them pick the one they like the most. So it's a lot of fun.
And that's great for inspiration purposes. We talk to a lot of people before they've even worked with an architect saying, well, I think I want this, but I'm not sure. And, people go right to House. They go right to Pinterest, Instagram, whatever your social media platform of choice is. And you just need to see other things and say, I absolutely love that. I want that. So it's easy to see, hey, here's the final built-in cabinets that I love, but having plan sets of, hey, I really like the flow of this. I think that's really, really nice for people to quickly get inspiration when they're talking about where walls are going and some of the obviously design phases before you get to selections and interior design.
Yeah, and one point on that, when you talk about going on the internet and looking at stuff, when you print a picture or save a picture, make a note of what it is that you like about that picture. I've had situations where somebody shows me a picture and it's beautiful, and I'm analyzing it, and then I'm trying to figure out what it is. And sometimes we really like that paint color on the wall. I'm like, okay, I'm glad I didn't, assume that you wanted your room to look like this room when it was just one little detail about the picture. So when you're sharing those inspiration images with your designer, you really want to make sure they understand what it is that you like about that picture, because that can really get confusing for me if I don't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Organization is key for everybody involved from beginning to end. Steve, thank you so much for your time. Any final words? I've really had a ton of fun with this, and maybe we'll have you back for another episode. And I was thinking, as we're going through this, it'd be fun if we got some video of one of the houses that you've designed that we've built. We could get some have some fun recording some things to point out and some design stuff, and get it on YouTube.
I think that would be fun. We could walk through the house and video the house and talk about the inspiration that made that made it happen. So I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Look forward to it. And I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.